Hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us during Ice Cream Hour. We hope we can be a good Friday afternoon experience. Really delighted to be here together with a whole host of colleagues. Corey obviously was just on the stage introducing this session, and he set up this session together with Morgan for our left. Also joining us for this session is Sina Brown and myself, Sofie Andersen from Antenna, and also on the panel is Leist, who's a visual artist and project coordinator with Art Beyond Sight, Joe Baskerville from CogApp, and Tasia Endo over here from Seattle Art Museum. Everybody's full information is up there, Twitter handles and titles and whatnot, so you can follow along. We have a couple, we have some hashtags for the session, so please do spread any information you think is interesting. The first one is a hashtag just for our session. The second, obviously, you're all familiar with by now, and the third is hashtag specifically for accessibility issues. So this is kind of a good one to know about in general if you're interested in finding out more about this field. A11Y. And I should say that I'm going to be reading out a little bit more from the slides than I would typically and describing what's on the screen to make sure that anybody in the audience or in the recording when they hear this afterwards can really follow along. So I should start by talking about what we're discussing today, which is accessibility for smartphones, for mobile in general. This is a topic that I've been thinking about a lot the last 9 months. Started a research project together with Art Beyond Sight to think about this because I found that there wasn't a great deal of information collected together on the question of how are we serving our audiences in museums in general, so including all audiences. And I have a provocation to kick off the session, which is, are museums and mobile inherently exclusionary experiences? Or are there perhaps advantages for both for individuals with disabilities? So I hope we're going to answer these questions a little bit and hopefully also give you some tools to take away to understand what's available out there in terms of accessibility features, and also along the lines of what Corey was talking about, thinking about these issues from the inception of your projects. So our research is an ongoing project. We have started a survey, which we started at the beginning of last year, looking at asking individuals with disabilities, cultural organizations, and access organizations about their use of mobile in museums. And we've already started to see that our survey results are skewing towards individuals who have low vision or who are blind, and some of our answers kind of skewed towards fewer answers at the end. So our first lesson is to create shorter surveys. So there's a lot more to come, hopefully, but we're going to share some of those learnings today. So we know that museums are using mobile, right? So there's a lot of research out there about that. Oops, skipping along. We know that 70% of art museums, according to Museum Mobile last year, were using mobile, and we are increasingly using platforms to engage visitors, to experiment, and attract new visitors. So how are they providing these experiences? Oh, sorry. Jumping along. We know that many are considering going from audio guides to smartphones, and that they are currently offering accessibility features. So in our minds, we're thinking, how are they transferring perhaps more traditional features like audio guides, verbal descriptions and whatnot into smartphone experiences. So we asked general questions of individuals with disabilities about their comfort level with technology. And we found that the general population's use of devices aligns very closely with the population of individuals with disabilities. The only thing that skews really heavily is that they particularly use iPhones and iPads. One interesting fact is that the individuals with disabilities, when they are in the older population, actually have an uptick in the use of tablets, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind when we're talking about older visitors in institutions and what kind of technology they are able to use. But I will say that, again, this is information that we are looking to mine further and to do a lot more research on. But certainly, individuals with disabilities use their iPhones and their smartphones to complete a complex array of daily tasks, everything from wayfinding and social, paying bills, and a lot of them have used audio guides and smartphones in the museum environment. And we also know that museums have been really good at providing access programming. So 93% of museums provided some kind of accessibility programming in their in the responses that we got, which I think is fantastic. But museums are really challenging environments for everybody. The information is dispersed. There's labels, there's signage, there's audio, there's video, there's ambient noise, which is variable throughout the locations. There are exterior locations where screens are hard to view. They're complex spaces to navigate, and they're spaces where when you're holding devices in your hands, you're perhaps hampered from doing other activities, and particularly if you have a disability that comes to the fore. But we know that individuals with disabilities go to museums and spend a significant amount of time there, at least a couple of hours, if not longer. I have so much data, I'm going to try and race through some of this. We know that they rate learning highly, and we know that not one approach fits all. In the museums that are considering going to mobile, who don't perhaps have mobile already, funding and lack of mobile strategy is one of the main factors. We know that people are not sure which devices to choose, and particularly with accessibility, this really comes to the fore. So why are we not, this might go some way, I suppose, to answering the question, why are we not designing universally from the inception? One of the things that really surprised me, and I think some of my other colleagues that were looking at this across different organizations, was that there are so many functionalities and advancements that have been made in this field that we're not taking advantage of currently. So we're going to turn over to Joe from CogApp to kind of do a very quick race through of what some of those functionalities are.
Hi. So I am a developer that's been making websites and apps for quite a few years, and I was aware that there are these features that the mobile platforms offer, and I was aware of a couple of them, VoiceOver, Magnification, stuff like that. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to do some research and pass on to you the things that I didn't know about. So basically everything that all the platforms are doing, and a comparison of the platforms and how they are catching up with each other. So I'm going to use elles as a basis, because they are really leading the way on this, and then we'll look at how the others compare. So in terms of features and offers, so I start off with Siri, because Siri is very useful because you can just launch it, talk to it, don't have to type, and get through through lots of things very easily. But equally, you can turn out the box, you can open your iPhone, get it out, turn Siri on, and say turn on VoiceOver, and immediately you're straight into an accessible situation. So you don't have to go down to the settings, get someone else to set up for you, etc. VoiceOver is going to be demoed, I believe, and you'll see how that works. But also the nice thing about it is it will also output to Bluetooth braille readers. So you can get these very cool braille readers where you keep your fingers on it and it refreshes underneath your fingers. And VoiceOver will push out information to that, which is very nice. They have this tool called Guided Access, which is on the left-hand side, and what it is that for people who have difficulty with their motor skills or hitting buttons or can accidentally tap other parts of the interface that make using certain experiences difficult, you can use Guided Access to restrict to a single app and also then restrict to certain areas of the screen, so that only those will be the ones that respond to touch. There's some really good pairing up with Bluetooth hearing aids. So there's a whole section devoted to that, and if you have Bluetooth hearing aids, what you can do is set it up with your phone and then give different profiles to hearing aids. So if you're in a crowded room, you might want it to be behaving in one way, and then when you go into a quiet room, you might want to behave to another, and you can just flip that around on your phone, which is very cool. Magnify mode is what's being shown on the right-hand side. So that's the way that you turn on magnify mode, and with a gesture you can zoom in and out, and you can pan around the screen, so it's really easy to see things that you might find normally difficult. The left-hand side is showing inverse mode, which is a way to flip the colours completely over, and so to make certain things easier to read. The middle one is showing touch assist, or assist touch, I think, or the other way around, assistive touch, and that is a way to If you have trouble with any gestures or any double taps or anything like that, you can, and then hardware keys as well, you can use that to activate those things. So if you wanted to double tap something, you bring it to select choose double tap, and it will perform that gesture for you. And then on the right hand side is a cool thing that's happened in iOS 7, which is switch control. And what that does is it will iterate through the interface one at a time, highlighting a thing to choose. And so people whose motor skills will allow them to activate a Bluetooth switch, for instance, can pair this up. And then as the interface hits the thing you're interested in selecting, you switch, it brings up this interface and other similar ones, where you are given an option of what do you want to do with this. It might be tap, it might be swipe, it might be do a whole load of other things. And so it lets you get through the entire interface with just one single switch, which is very cool. And then they have this new thing as well, where you can use the front-facing camera to act as a switch, so that it will recognise head movement as a switch activation. So basically, you can get around the entire interface on most apps just by moving your head, which is also extremely cool. So Android, very similar situation, but not out of the box. So Android has voice recognition, and it has talkback screen reader, and it has braille back, so it does all that stuff. You can turn on talkback out of the box. I believe you hold it in, get haptic feedback that the device is turned on, and then you do a gesture, it's a rectangle, and then talkback comes on, and then you can get through the stuff. Talkback also has a nice tutorial, which is interesting because the iOS one doesn't, I believe. So talkback sort of takes you through how you use it as well as what it does. Most of the accessibility features I was talking about, a subset of them are available out of the box, but most of the other ones are available through third-party apps. So you can still do all this stuff on Android, but you might have to install them through the App Store, etc. And then BlackBerry and Windows Phone, we were talking about a reduced feature set. What we were talking about, BlackBerry has a screen reader, and I'm talking about the latest devices here. I think it's a triple tap on the powered device will turn on the screen reader. It does have the usual visual tweaks, so you can increase the font size and make it bolder and stuff like that. Windows has a mobile accessibility mode where it will download a suite of apps that you flip into that aren't made by Microsoft but give you a more accessible version of the familiar features. I think I'm running out of time there. I was going to give some quick tips on... do you want me to still do that? Okay, so my really quick tips would be, if you web app content, typical website accessibility rules apply, but typically with a web app you will be manipulating the screen with JavaScript a lot. So if your content is laid out semantically, that really aids screen readers. If you're injecting things all over the place into that semantic markup, just have to be aware that you are doing that, and it will mess up the order of things as people page through it. Hybrid apps. The web part of your hybrid app is going to the same rules apply, and then you have the benefit of hybrid app of using the native widgets, of which, if you're using native apps and then hybrid apps, the native widgets, if you stick to native widgets, then everything will be very accessible. As soon as you stray away from the native widgets, you write your own maps and things like that, then you can tap into the accessibility features of the platforms, but you just have to be aware that that won't be available at the box. You have to do some work to get in there. But in general, if you stick with the native text boxes, sliders, buttons, etc., then you will be able to provide a very accessible experience.
Thanks, Joe. So what we're going to do now is just do a quick demo of what it's like to use iOS, and Annie Leist is going to come up and join us for that.
It's turning on. Yeah, fantastic. I love it when technology works. It's always exciting. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to fly through a very quick demo of a couple of the accessibility things that we've already kind of mentioned in terms of, and please don't judge me by the number of apps that I have or the number of unread messages in my email. I have a little bit of an addiction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about or show you guys very quickly how VoiceOver, which is the screen reader built into the iPhone, actually works from a practical standpoint. And also I'm going to talk a little bit about some design changes that just came through in iOS 7 that help make it more accessible for people with low vision. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the features and functionalities that our survey revealed and that some other research that we've done has revealed that could be things you might want to think about when you're talking about making your museum apps accessible to a number of different groups. So what I'm going to do very quickly is turn on VoiceOver, and one of the nice things that I have on my phone is a very quick way to turn it on. Normally you would go into your settings application and go under the accessibility settings, which are under general settings, and turn on these things on and off. But there's also a very quick way, if I click my home button 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and I have some choices here of some of the accessibility features that are available. So I'm going to tap the VoiceOver option. VoiceOver on. All right, so on the screen, and hopefully we won't have too much feedback here with my phone and the microphone. On the screen, you're going to be able to see a little bit of a square box. That box is called the VoiceOver cursor, and that cursor kind of tells you what VoiceOver, the screen reader, is focusing on or what it's saying to you, right? And it's important to, for someone who is blind, that cursor doesn't really matter, but for someone who might be sharing the phone or for someone who has low vision, sometimes that cursor can be very handy, and it's very handy for demos like this. So the way VoiceOver in general works as a screen reader, if you are blind or have low vision, obviously using a touch screen has its challenges. If you have if you can see well enough, basically you can look at what you want on the screen and tap on it in one step. But what VoiceOver does is it actually breaks that down into 2 steps. So first you have to find what you want, and then you have to activate what you want. So as I'm finding what I want, there are several ways to do that in VoiceOver. I can either kind of move my finger around the screen. Let's see. Are you guys able to hear that? Okay. That's hard for me. Under the mic. There we go. All right. Okay. So what I'm doing is simply dragging my finger over the screen, and you guys may be able to tell that I'm not actually looking at my screen. Right? So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to open this particular folder, right? I've gotten VoiceOver to say it to me, then one way I can activate that folder, as soon as VoiceOver has said that as soon as I've heard that name of that folder, I can take my finger and tap twice anywhere on the screen. Because remember, if I can't see, I can't aim. So 1, 2. And that actually opens my folder that I wanted to open to get to the app that I wanted, right? So that's one way. I can move my finger around the screen, I can lift my finger and tap twice to actually activate that button or whatever else I would like to do. Another way to find things is by flicking your finger from left to right. So a single sort of flicking motion from left to right or right to left will go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, or the previous thing and the previous thing and the previous thing. So right? So you can see the VoiceOver cursor kind of moving from one thing to the next, right? Well, let's say that the app that I want is actually on the next page of that folder. I might want to scroll to the next page. And what you can do, and the way that you would do that sort of without VoiceOver turned on would be just to sort of swipe your finger, but we've already seen that if I swipe my finger as if I were going to the next page, it actually just tells me what the previous thing is. So in VoiceOver, when you're scrolling, you would use 3 fingers on your screen. Page 2 of 2, right? Now the app that I'm going for is the Notes app, right? Notes, right? Double tap to open, it's nice, it gives me hints. And we have a little note here, it says Hello Baltimore. Let's say I want to edit that note. Again, I just tapped it and I double tapped it. Here's my keyboard. You might think that using your keyboard is a real drag in VoiceOver, and you might be right. But there are a couple different things that you can do to type a little bit more quickly. If I wanted to type something new, I can either find the key, capital F. It's fun to do this upside down too. There we go. So I just typed very quickly there the letter H. There are a couple other ways that you can find and activate things. We're running a little bit low on time, so if anybody has any further questions about this, you can come and see a little bit more about how to use this. There's so many other features. If anybody was at Sina's workshop the other day, he flew through a bunch of them as well. But that is, I'm going to turn off VoiceOver really quickly just because I want to point out a couple other things.
Accessibility options. Selected. VoiceOver. VoiceOver.
Yep. Okay. Oops. So just another thing really quickly. In terms of design, if we're talking about universal design, there are some new features in iOS 7 that have adjusted design. If anybody has questions about those, you can come find me after the workshop. But, yep, so I'm moving on to get rid of my phone on the screen and go back to our presentation here, because what we want to talk about is flying through some of those, there we go. Command F5, let's go back to play. In a second now, screen.